We are back on the Rational Boomer podcast. Hopefully, your day is going well. It's Sunday. We're in the weekend, kind of a lull for news. That said, we've got some things to talk about. There's some question about Donald Trump's mental acuity and his physical health. I know we've talked about this for a long time, but there's been some symptoms as of late. It starts to look like Donald Trump is just beginning the decline. And over the next 10 months, it's going to get worse and worse. We'll talk about that in just a bit. Had a great day yesterday. Wife and I had a old-fashioned date night. Well, it was kind of a date night. We went and saw a movie, and then we had dinner. It's a good old-fashioned date night, except it was a little different for us now in our 60s than it might have been in our 30s. You see, we went to the movie at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Shortly thereafter, we went to dinner about 5 o'clock. We're home. My wife is in bed by about 7:30. Now, keep in mind, she got up real early yesterday morning to go to work, so she needed the sleep. But here I am at about 10:30 Saturday night, all wide-eyed and bushy-tailed, ready to go. And why am I wide-eyed and bushy-tailed? Because I saw my wife off at 2 o'clock in the morning, didn't wake up till fucking 9. That's the beautiful thing about being retired. You get to go to bed whenever you want. You get up whenever you want. Sure, there are people that try to shame you that say, well, you get up too late. Well, I got up at 4:30 every day for 27 years. I think I made my bones. And the fact of the matter is, it isn't so much when you get up, it's how much sleep you have. Now, if I went to bed at 10 and didn't wake up till 10 and slept for 12 hours, yeah, that's a little lazy. But if I went to bed at 2, woke up at 9 and got 7 hours, is that so fucking surprising? Anyway, the movie we saw was something called American Fiction. The lead actor was Jeffrey Wright. He's been in a million things. You know him when you see him. I don't know if he's ever been the lead before, but this is a great movie. Great story, well done. I was thoroughly entertained through the whole movie. So if you're trying to pick out a movie to go look at, check American Fiction. I don't think you'll be disappointed by it. Well, we've got some emails, some short emails today, and we've got some things to talk about. So let's get to it. First one comes from Willie. Firstly, I viewed many of your TikTok posts and thoroughly appreciate and enjoy all of them. I'm a 63-year-old retired veteran. One question for now. What's your take on the Cruz and McConnell question to the Supreme Court? What is an insurrection anyway? This is one that I just didn't understand where it came from and couldn't find a simple response to them to be. Just review the January 6, 2020 tapes. Willie. Well, I've been hearing a story about this, and some other people that are kind of concerned about this too is people like Jim Jordan, Paul Gosar, and such. Because here's the deal. If they find that Donald Trump can be taken off the ballot for this insurrection thing, if they take Donald Trump off the ballot, then a precedence has been set. And people like Jim Jordan, Paul Gosar, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Ted Cruz, I don't know about McConnell, but those folks could be put in question as to whether they are qualified to be on the ballot too. You see, what's going to happen is if the Supreme Court says, yes, keep Donald Trump off the ballot, that's going to expose all the other Trump-a-fuck, MAGA-fucks too. People in their home states are going to say, well, if they got Donald Trump, how about this motherfucker? Yeah, these people are nervous about that. That's why a bunch of senators sent things off to judges and stuff. They're nervous about this because they know it's going to come back and bite them in the ass. And they don't want that. And that's one of the reasons I think the Supreme Court is probably not going to take Donald Trump off the ballot. I really don't. I could be wrong. I've been wrong before. But not the backlash, but the fallout from of it is going to be pretty significant, not only for Donald Trump, but for Republicans in general. And they may be too afraid to start that bullshit. But if they do find that the Colorado Supreme Court was right, Well, then the shit's going to fly, and there's going to be some scared representatives and some scared senators. All right, the next one comes from Grandma Patty. Hi, Boomer. I don't know if you saw this one or not. It speaks to your assertion that Cheeto Man may not be the candidate and how that would work. It's an interesting look into the inner workings of parties that we as voters might not know. I know it's a bit long to read on the podcast, but I thought you'd like the info. Yes, and I'm not going to read it here because it is long, but Grandma Patty, thank you for that. Yeah, there's a lot of reasons I don't think Donald Trump will be the nominee. And it's kind of what we're getting into in this program. We've seen a couple of things as of recent times that make you wonder about Donald Trump. Like, for example, when he put his hand up and it was all scuffed up, I don't know if it's blisters or scrapes or whatever the hell it is. A lot of people have had suggestions it's syphilis or it's golf related. And I don't know that any of those are true. It could be. It could be. But a couple of people have made some other suggestions. First of all, one gentleman said he's 78 years old. He has trouble with his balance. We've seen him walk down ramps and stairs very gingerly. We watch him stand at a 45-degree angle. We see him using toe pads. It's conceivable that he fell and either scraped his hand on the sidewalk or burned it on something or whatever. Maybe he grabbed a hot teapot. I don't fucking know. But this could have something to do with his physical condition. Now, another woman just sent me a note that I hadn't considered, but it's interesting. She's suggesting that because he wears a diaper all the time and he's incontinent, that he may have contracted a UTI, a urinary tract infection. And if untreated, it can create some mental problems, apparently. This is what she says. Now, I will tell you that I had a UTI once, and people always say, men don't get UTIs. Well, I don't know about you, but I got one time, and that motherfucker is painful. It's painful. Now, I can't imagine Donald Trump just letting it go. I don't know. Maybe he doesn't feel it. But, if anybody's going to get a UTI, any man is going to get a UTI, they're going to be wearing diapers and have shitty and wet pants all the time. I will tell you, when I got the UTI, that wasn't the case with me. I wasn't wearing diapers. I'm proud to say I don't wear diapers to this day. I'm not saying I'm not going to. I'm not saying it doesn't even sound a little convenient, but I wasn't at the time. I'm not now. I'm cool. But these are all interesting things. And this is what I've been saying all along is that I don't even care about the legal challenges or anything like that. When you get a man in this physical and mental condition and you heap this kind of trauma on his head, I don't know how one survives it. Now, I'm not saying he's going to keel over and die, but he may be incapacitated or he may just lose it completely. And as you'll hear in the upcoming story after the emails, it's starting to show and it's getting concerning. So thank you, Grandma Patty. I appreciate the tip. All right, the next one comes from Becky. Says, "Hi, Mike. Peter Navarro is going to jail and paying a fine. What about all the idiots in the House that ignored their subpoenas to appear before the January 6th committee? Do you think they'll ever be held accountable? Thanks for all you do, Becky." Well, it depends on what you mean, Beck. Yeah, Peter Navarro, he's going to jail and he's shitting his pants. He's crying and whining for money and all these sorts of things. Try to GoFundMe thing, but nobody knows who the fuck he is. So I'm sure he didn't get any money. If you're asking, do I think the members of Congress will get indicted for not appearing in front of the January 6th committee? I do not. I think the DOJ sees the idea of prosecuting the members of Congress for this particular thing maybe a little dicey. I mean, you're sending subpoenas who are already in the body that's subpoena in them, and they don't show up. Plus, they're sitting members of Congress. I think that's too touchy for them. I'm not saying I agree with it. I'm just saying that's how they look at it. Now, do I think they'll be accountable? I do think they'll be accountable because I think further down the road, maybe not that far, these same fucks will get indictments for their activities and participation in the insurrection. Now, that the DOJ will fuck with because that's a serious crime. Not showing up or contempt of Congress is a serious crime, but clearly we find out it's not as serious as we once thought because, well, um, it showed that Congress has no teeth when it comes to this sort of thing. These people from the Republican Party didn't feel concerned enough to be compelled to show up to the January 6th committee, and they weren't indicted for contempt of Congress. And again, because they're sitting members of Congress, apparently that's just too dicey for them to do. But the insurrection, that's going to be a different deal. And I think we're going to see members of Congress, maybe Ginny Thomas, certainly Roger Stone, indicted ultimately. I was talking to Ed about it on the show previously, and thanks to Ed for coming by. We missed him. It's been a few weeks, and now he's finally back. But the thing is when are we going to see those superseding indictments? I thought they might come out shortly after Donald Trump was indicted, but we know that Jack Smith is very sensitive in trying to keep Donald Trump's indictment simple and clear cut. And I think that's wise to do that. Um, Donald Trump is the only one that requires some concern for time sensitivity. They want to get this done before the election. And if they start throwing other names into the mix, then it's going to make it convoluted and confusing, and it may slow down what they're trying to do with Donald Trump. So I think that Jack Smith is doing the right thing and holding off until Donald Trump is at least in the process, till he's at least in court, or maybe until he's after court. So if he goes to trial in March and it's ended up in May, I think that's when you'll see the superseding indictments. And of course, he'll probably do it later today, and I'll be wrong. But that's the way I'm feeling it, because I would have thought they would have come out with the superseding indictments before now. But clearly, Jack Smith has a plan, and he knows more about that shit than I do. So I just put full trust into Jack Smith. All right, the next one comes from Lisa. Hi, Mike. Thank you for your content. Would you please speak about how, if the Gaza situation may affect the president's bid for the presidency? The rumor is many will not vote for him because of it. Honestly, Lisa, I've talked about this before and I'll say it again. I think it's all bullshit, to be perfectly honest with you. This reeks of Republican rhetoric. I've talked to a lot of young people and I've asked them this very question, and none of them seem to be considering that when it comes to voting in 2024 in November. Here's the thing, we've got millennials and Gen Zs. Do you really think they're more concerned about the situation in Gaza? They think about that more than overturning Roe v. Wade or some of the authoritarian threats that are out there? Again, we've seen it over and over again. The Republicans come out and they make all these claims. Oh, Hunter Biden's feeding money to Donald Trump or to Joe Biden. That didn't happen. There's no evidence of it, but they keep talking about it. They keep making claims. Oh, Democrats are a bunch of pedophiles. That's not true, but they keep saying it. And I think this situation is the same thing. They're trying to control the narrative. They're trying to influence people. By saying this, hopefully young people will say, yeah, you're right. We should be mad at Joe Biden for being on the side of Israel. I've said this before. Joe Biden has no choice. We are allies with Israel. That's our responsibility to stand behind them. I think Joe Biden has shown his true colors in dealing with Israel. He's putting pressure on Israel to be more humanitarian. They're trying to get more resources to the people trapped in Gaza. Joe Biden's doing all he can, but he can only do so much. And do I think all the young people are mad at him about what he's doing? No, I don't. I think it's bullshit. I think it's Republican rhetoric, and it doesn't mean a fucking thing. So Yeah, I wouldn't worry about that. Now, as I was talking about Donald Trump, a lot of us have talked about his physical capabilities and his mental acuity, and we thought it was diminishing. I think what we saw in the last day or two is maybe the turn to end up in the slide. Like I said, we saw his hand with his sores on it. It's reminiscent of what we saw with Mitch McConnell. And then yesterday, he had this speech that he gave, and it was pretty disturbing, actually. If you haven't seen it, you should go online and check it. It's no doubt on YouTube or wherever. But Donald Trump on Friday blamed Nikki Haley for security issues during the January 6, 2021 insurrection, seemingly confusing former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi with his rival for the GOP presidential nomination. Trump, while touting the number of supporters present at Concord, New Hampshire rally, claimed that Haley, who had previously served as United Nations ambassador and South Carolina governor, gets crowds of like 9 people in the Granite State before he brought up the U.S. Capitol attack. He said this, by the way, you never report the crowd on January 6th. You know, Nikki Haley, Nikki Haley, Nikki Haley 3 times. You know, do you know they destroyed all of that information, all of that evidence, everything deleted and destroyed all of it, the former president said. That sentence right there makes no sense. I mean, I understand what he's trying to get at, but he seems to have a problem making his point. He goes on to say because of lots of things like Nikki Haley is in charge of security, we offered her 10,000 people, soldiers, National Guards, whatever they want. They turned it down. They don't want to talk about that. They're very dishonest people. Clearly, Nikki Haley wasn't in Washington, D.C. at the time. She wasn't even in the administration at the time. Clearly, he's confusing her with Nancy Pelosi. Now, I can understand a slip of the tongue or something like this, but he said this woman's name 5 times. He never caught it himself, and nobody around him were willing to correct him because they're all scared to death of him. Now, Trump has previously pointed his finger at Pelosi for security breakdowns when the riot took place, claiming that she turned down an offer to activate the National Guard when his supporters stormed the Capitol in Washington, D.C. Now, that's absolute bullshit. Nancy Pelosi had no power. She was not directing the National Guard. You know who was directing the National Guard? Michael Flynn's brother, who was in the Pentagon. You see, in D.C., it isn't a state, so there is no state governor to direct the National Guard. So it's directed by a general in the Pentagon. And that general happened to be Mike Flynn's brother, who was also a Trump humping piece of shit. Where do you suppose that this general, this Mike Flynn's brother, was getting his orders from? Well, the only place that could be is Donald Trump. Donald Trump is projecting here. He's trying to blame it on Nancy Pelosi, but everybody knows it's not Nancy Pelosi, it's Donald fucking Trump. But the sad thing about this, it's almost a little disturbing. While he's ranting about Nancy Pelosi, he's mistakenly put in the name Nikki Haley because that's what's forefront in his mind. Some people might say, it's just a simple mistake. I would say that if he did it once, it was a slip of the tongue, but he did it 3 or 4 times and made no attempt to correct it. Donald Trump is saying a lot of things. He started talking about something with banks too, and he started using the term debanking. Did he mean debunking or did he mean debanking? And if he meant debanking, I've never heard that word before. I don't know that it even exists. Maybe it does. Donald Trump is starting down that slippery slope. Things aren't going well for him. You see him when he comes to these rallies before he steps on stage and has spray tan on. This man looks in rough shape. This man looks like he's going through some things. Now, of course, as I said, the House Speaker isn't in charge of the security at Capitol and don't direct the National Guard. Drew Hamill, a spokesman for the Pelosi camp previously told the Associated Press that the former House Speaker was no more in charge of Capitol security than Mitch McConnell was. This is a clear attempt to whitewash what happened on January 6th and divert the blame. See, that's the other crazy thing. If Nancy Pelosi was in charge of the National Guard and she refused to enact the National Guard, why would she do that? Her guy, Joe Biden, was going to have the election certified. And by letting these people go through, they were trying to stop that. Why would Nancy Pelosi, a dyed in the wool Democrat who supported Joe Biden, why would she want that to allow to happen? And that's where the story fucking falls apart. Now, a number of critics on social media mocked Trump for Friday's remarks, questioning whether he can identify a fucking whale. I don't. The thing about it is Donald Trump is in trouble. And as I've said all along, you can't take a man of 78 in poor physical and mental health and heap 91 felonies on his ass, risk taking away all his money and all his properties and all his power, and expect that he's going to do well with this. He's not. He's too old. He's in ill health anyway. And between now and November, a lot of bad shit is going to happen. And it's going to take its toll on Donnie's mind and his body. This is one of the main reasons why I don't think he will be the nominee. I don't think he will either be physically or mentally capable of taking it on. It will get bad enough where the Republicans will have to do something. All right. Months before Donald Trump's defiant turn as a witness in the New York civil fraud trial, the former president came face to face with the state attorney general who was suing him when he sat in a deposition last year at her Manhattan office. And that's interesting because this video now came public. And it's interesting watching Donald Trump. It's one thing to read transcripts or even hear the audio, but to look at this clown's face while he's going through it. He sat there pouting like a petulant child. And we thought he might plead the fifth. He decided not to do that. But suffice to say that this deposition didn't go well for him. Now, video made public Friday of the 7-hour closed-door session last April shows the Republican presidential frontrunner's demeanor going from calm and cool to indignant. At one point, ripping Attorney General Letitia James' lawsuit against him as a disgrace, and also called it politically motivated and a witch hunt. Now he's sitting there with folded arms, and incredulous Trump complained to the state lawyer questioning him that he was being forced to justify myself to you. Well, yeah, she's the attorney general, and this is a deposition. After decades of success building a real estate empire that's now threatened by this court case. Well, it depends on how you built that shit. If you lied and cheated all the way, then I don't know that you want to take credit for it. Now, the video shows him smirking and pouting his lips as the attorney general, a Democrat, introduced herself and told him that she was committed to a fair and impartial legal process. Now, I can tell you this, Donald Trump probably stepped in that deposition thinking to himself, oh, I got this. I'm a genius. I'm a brilliant orator. I can talk my way out of anything. But he quickly found out that that's not the case. Although, even though he failed there, he still feels like he's a genius and he can talk his way out of anything. That's why he shows up in court and tries to butt in and give a closing argument. Now, James's office released the video Friday in response to requests from media outlets under New York's Freedom of Information law. Trump's lawyers previously posted a transcript of his remarks to the trial docket in August. Now, James's lawsuit accuses Trump, his company, and top executives of defrauding banks, insurers, and others by inflating his wealth and exaggerating the value of assets on annual financial statements used to get loans and make other deals, insurance and such. And there's no question he did that. The documentation proves that out. Now, Judge Arthur Engeron, who will decide the case because a jury is not allowed in this type of lawsuit, has said he hopes to have a ruling by the end of January. We are now on January 21st. So at some point in the next 10 days, we're going to know what Judge Engeron has decided as far as what Donnie will have to pay and whether he'll be able to continue operating his business in New York. Now, Friday's video is a rare chance for the public at large to see Trump as a witness. Cameras were not permitted in the courtroom when Trump testified on November 6th, nor were they allowed at closing arguments in the case on January 11th. You know, Donald Trump defied the judge and gave a 6-minute diatribe that didn't mean anything. Now, telling James and her staff, you don't have a case, Trump insisted the banks she alleges were snookered with lofty valuations suffered no harm, got paid in his deals, and to this day have no complaints. Well, they may have gotten paid, and I question that because Donald Trump doesn't pay a lot of folks. But the fact of the matter is when you lie about your wealth, they'll give you a better interest rate. When that's a lie, you should have gotten a higher interest rate, and the difference between those two things and how much money you would have had to pay the bank, well, we hear with Donald Trump, it was something like $150 million. I would say that's significant. Besides that, given that he lied about it, had he had to go with his actual numbers, maybe he couldn't even get the loan. Maybe he couldn't afford it. And then he couldn't have grown his company because he wasn't as viable as he claimed. He went on to say, do you know the banks made a lot of money? Trump asked, previewing his later trial testimony. Do you know I don't believe I ever got even a default notice, and even during COVID, the banks were all paid, and yet you're suing on behalf of banks. I guess it's crazy. The whole case is crazy. Well, the other thing, Donnie, what you did is fucking illegal. And I'd be a little worried that Alvin Bragg isn't looking at some criminal charges as well. You remember Alvin Bragg convicted the company and Alan Weisselberg. After this lawsuit, Alvin may be looking into Donnie too because he had his hands all over this shit. He said, banks want to do business with me because I'm rich, Trump told James. But you know what? They're petrified to do business because of you. Trump complained New York authorities spend all their time investigating me instead of stopping violent crime in the streets. He said they'd put his recently jailed ex-financial chief, Alan Weisselberg, through hell and back for dodging taxes on company-paid perks. Again, fucking illegal, and he was convicted of it. At a previous deposition in the case in August 2022, Trump invoked his Fifth Amendment privilege against self-incriminating himself, and he did that like 400 times. He said he did so because he was certain his answers would be used as a basis for criminal charges. And he's probably fucking right. Now, Trump complained New York authorities spend all their time investigating me instead of the crimes in the streets. That's such a typical response. Now, Trump described the statements he put out as fairly good compilation of his properties rather than a true representation of their value. Some numbers he noted were guesstimates. Guesstimates. You're a billionaire. You're a land baron, a mogul, if you will. And you base all your documentation and all your statements on guesswork? I find that hard to believe. I mean, he's the one that sent in his taxes and then put a disclaimer on it saying, well, you know, it may be not all right, but because I'm telling you up front, I'm good. Donald Trump doesn't even know you can't say, well, it may not all be right, but that doesn't make him still culpable for committing crimes, because that's exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about crimes. Now, Trump claimed the statements were mainly for his use, though he conceded financial institutions sometimes ask for them for your use. So, as a mogul, as a land baron, as a billionaire, you just need rough estimates. I've been in business for myself, nothing as big as what he's done, but you got to kind of keep close track of what's going on for tax purposes, just for the running of a company. I'm not buying the fact that these were all just guesstimates. Now, even then, he insisted it didn't matter legally if they were accurate or not because they came with a disclaimer. See what I told you? A disclaimer. Yeah, I may have fucked up, so I'm good. No, Donnie, that's not how it works. I have a clause in there that says, don't believe the statement. Then why are you turning over statements that nobody's supposed to believe? He's suggesting that you go out and do your own work. You're supposed to pay no credence to what we say whatsoever. Not true. Trump estimated that his brand alone is worth 10 billion. That's just something he pulled out of his ass. And keep in mind, he shits his pants, so that claim is full of shit. He called it the most valuable asset I have and attributed his political success to the ubiquity of his name and persona. I became president of the brand, okay, Trump said. I became president. I think it's the hottest brand in the world. Not anymore, motherfucker. Not anymore. You're soon to be a pariah and your brand is done. I mean, your company's all but out of business because it's been convicted of fraud. How many banks, insurance companies, other companies want to deal with a company that's been convicted of multiple cases of fraud? A brand isn't worth anything anymore, Donnie, and it never was worth $10 billion. But you keep trying. Wait till Judge Engeron comes out with his final decision, and you're going to be a broke ass bitch, and everybody's going to be laughing about it. All right. We will take a quick break and we will be right back. So it seems like Donald Trump's getting a little sensitive these days. We know how he loves rallies. He loves the adulation and the cheering. The only thing is, the rallies are a little less well attended. And he's getting some pushback. There are some naysayers out there that are yelling shit at Donald Trump. And he doesn't like it. He doesn't like it a bit. On Saturday, Trump ordered his audience and or security team members to remove a man who appeared to be yelling during the former president's New Hampshire rally. Now, we don't know what he was yelling. It might have been positive for Donald Trump, but that got Donald Trump's ire up. Trump was speaking at the SNHU Arena in Manchester, New Hampshire, when he interrupts himself to say, "Who is this? You can get him out of here. Get out of here." He continued, "Go ahead, you can throw him out," the former president said, causing the audience to boo the individual and then chant USA. He went on to say, "Now we know politics is getting serious. He is just a disturbed person. That used to happen all the time. People used to call for it. We want it back," he said, as footage shows the man being physically removed. The former president then changed the subject, saying, "This is only happening, all of this, because of all the weaponization." He's talking about the weaponization of the DOJ that he claims. The fact of the matter is, if there was any weaponization of the DOJ, it was during the Trump administration. Um, we see the Republican Party in the House weaponizing a lot of things against Joe Biden, Hunter Biden, and whoever else they feel threatened by. But Donald Trump is getting a little edgy. His nerves are getting a little shaken. He's not looking good. He's not sounding good or coherent. And he's even getting some physical symptoms on his hands. Donald Trump is starting his decline. And usually, what happens when this happens, the decline goes pretty quickly once it starts. And it almost seems like it started. All right, moving on. MSNBC analyst Jen Rubin told host Ali Velshi on Saturday that the mainstream media has normalized and cleaned up Donald Trump, and with their effort as a false balance in treating the Republican Party like the Democratic Party, they have covered for and failed to report on his totalitarian intent. What she's saying is that the media, whether it be the left side or or the right side media, they've kind of given him some grace, sanitized some of the things he's done, or maybe not reported some of the crazy shit that's happening. But she's getting to the point here where she's saying that's starting to end, and that will be adding to the demise of Donald Trump. Now, Rubin was on MSNBC's Velshi Saturday along with the Atlantic's McKay Coppins, during which they discussed an article from Coppins advocating that people attend Trump rallies to get a true sense of exactly what they are facing from the ex-president in 2024. After Coppins made his case, Velshi said the people who watch MSNBC don't even want to watch clips of Donald Trump on our shows, but added to Rubin that people I talk to do treat him as a quirky abstraction, as opposed to possibly the guy who's going to help oversee the demise of democracy in America. And I think that's true. I think the media has helped that along. He was a shit show. He was a train wreck. He was good for TV and good for ratings, so they just kind of looked the other way when he got into some dangerous areas. Well, it is kind of dangerous, but we could use the ratings. And I think both the left and right side media are both guilty of this. Rubin blamed the press for the lack of urgency about Trump. She said, "This speaks to how badly the mainstream media has covered him. They have normalized him. They have cleaned up the rhetoric so he sounds in a clip or he reads in print much more coherent than he actually is. It's only very recently that the mainstream media has been reporting on his really shocking totalitarian claims. But of course, he's been this way all along." And that's interesting that she says that. A lot of the stuff that he's saying isn't new for Donald Trump. It's just that the media didn't want to kill the golden goose. They didn't want to end him because he meant too much in terms of ratings and money. So they kind of helped him along. That's why when he'd be in interviews, they'd give him softballs and they wouldn't follow up on hard questions. It was better to keep him talking because it was good for the bottom line. Rubin said that the media has done such a bad job because they try to treat Republicans like they treat Democrats in pursuit of false balance and a failure to side with truth. She went on to add the Trump rally goers are part of the fascist cult and utterly irrational and therefore impervious to facts. Her prescription for the mainstream media is to focus on the re education of people who have lost sight of the danger. What you have to do if you care about democracy is mobilize the people who already know that he's a danger and reaffirming and re-educate the people who are perhaps kind of flirting in the middle. They're soft Republicans. They're never Republicans about the danger of going back to Trump, she said. And I think that's the job between now and November. When Fox News hosts bash the mainstream media, it's popular to mock them for not including their network as part of the media. And so it's worth noting that the implication of the MSNBC analyst and the MSNBC host who said he agrees with her presumes that their outlets are not part of the guilty MSM either, mainstream media. And that's true. You know, everybody's horrible but me. And that's what Fox News does. But to a certain extent, so does the left side media. They've given Donald Trump a pass for a long fucking time. All of the media, left and right side media. And again, it was to benefit themselves. Every time Donald Trump came on, everybody had to see it, and it meant ratings. But now we're seeing some different things. It's gotten too real, too dangerous. And now people are finally willing to maybe reveal the facts or the truth about the things Donald Trump is doing or saying. This country loves building up and creating a superstar, but they love even better tearing those motherfuckers down. And I think we're at that stage with Donald Trump. He's gotten to the lofty points. Uh, he took advantage and mishandled and misused his position, and now they're going to take him down. It may not happen tomorrow, but you're seeing it more and more in the media. they are starting to report some of the crazy bullshit, like what I talked about earlier, where he referred to Nikki Haley when he meant Nancy Pelosi. We might not have ever seen that clip back in the day, but now that it's cool to rip Donald Trump and expose him for who it is, now we're starting to see it. Now, that's a good thing that the media is starting to go that way, but keep in mind this: we wouldn't be in this position if the media didn't sanitize the things that Donald Trump did to make themselves money. We wouldn't be in this position if they'd done what they're doing now in the beginning. Frankly, if they'd done what they're doing now in the beginning, Donald Trump would have never been president. So, yes, I fault the media a lot for Donald Trump becoming president. And they are also culpable for the negative things that have happened to this country, the risk that we've gone through with this country. And it's been pretty expensive for this country. I mean, over and above all the criminality and corruption, let's just talk about COVID. Donald Trump said it was a hoax. He did absolutely nothing about it, and 1 million Americans died. Now, it's been said by doctors if Donald Trump had done anything that a normal president would have done, he could have probably saved three-fourths of those people. He could have saved 750,000 lives, but he didn't. And he didn't, in addition to all the Republicans backing him up all the way. Now, had the media exposed him for what he was before then, we might not have had those many people die. We wouldn't have had those shutdowns. But that's how terrible this is. And I do blame the media for a lot of this. They gave him credibility when he wasn't a real candidate for president. I don't think Donald Trump even thought he would ever become president of the United States. But surprise, surprise, he did, because he was always on TV. The left and the right side media lent him some credibility. People started like hearing the shouting and the ranting and the raving. They were easily taken in by this rhetoric. You have to understand there's a lot of people that are in Donald Trump's base that don't have a lot going for them, and they blame the government for oppressing them. So they find a guy who says, I'm going to fight for you against our government. And they say, yeah, I'm in. This is my one chance to make it in this world. They believe that. And then they got caught up in all the bullshit and all the fear mongering of brown people and LGBTQ people. All these people are trying to take something away from me. We got to fight against him. That's what Donald Trump made them believe, and that's what Donald Trump said he was going to do. He was going to eradicate those folks, literally eradicate those folks, so his people could be safe. Now, we know all of that is bullshit, but there are some people that just can't grasp it. They're so much in fear, and that is the essence of the Republican Party. It's all about fear. There's never anything positive told to these people. We got to be afraid of the brown people coming across the border. We got to be fearful of the LGBTQ co-opting and indoctrinating our children. We can't talk about bad things in history because that just makes white people look bad and the black people will take over. This is what they do. It's all about fear. And that's where this country's got to stop. We never lived or governed by fear before. And anytime you do anything in your life and it's fear based, you're going to fail. That's why people always come to me and say, every time I listen to your TikToks, I feel better. You seem so confident. I'm still not sure, but you seem so confident. And the fact of the matter is the reason I seem confident is because I am. I'm not specifically going out on TikTok or in the podcast trying to make you feel better. I mean, if you do in the process, that's wonderful. But I'm trying to get to the facts. One of the things I do that other media doesn't do, and maybe many people don't do, is I take emotions out of it. I take fear out of it. I look strictly at the facts, the truth, and the history. And then I make decisions based on that. Everything else is just assumptions or predictions. I'm not making predictions. I'm taking a look at the facts and what is the reasonable outcome from those facts. Like, for example, I still have people telling me, oh, Donald Trump's going to get reelected. I've heard a pollster on TV who's a conservative said, I'll bet $150,000 that Donald Trump will win the presidential election. I'll take all of that because I know it's not true. And the reason it's not true is had nothing to do with emotions. It has everything to do with the facts. Donald Trump lost by 7 million votes to Biden in 2020. He has done nothing to improve his situation. In fact, he's made it worse. So, how does that make sense? We also know this Roe v. Wade situation is a big factor. It was in 2022. They thought there would be a red wave, and there was not. And it was largely due to overturning Roe v. Wade. Now, that hasn't gone away. Women have not forgotten about it. And it's going to be a huge factor in 2024. And Donald Trump is dumb enough to go on TV and say, overturning Roe v. Wade, I did that. I'm proud of it. You should thank me for overturning Roe v. Wade. Just in that one video, and Roe v. Wade in general, that's going to cost the Republicans the election, going to cost Donald Trump the election if he even gets there. This has nothing to do with fear. This has nothing to do with emotion. You look at the facts, you use some logic, and that's what you come up with. Unfortunately, that's not what the media does. That's not what a lot of people do. I got people that come to me every day. Oh, I heard this. Now I'm frightened. Let's talk about Fani Willis in Georgia. We got this scandal where she is alleged to have some affair with the special counsel. Now, whether that happened or not, I don't know. Don't fucking care because it has nothing to do with the case. I was listening to the lawyer Kirshner, Glenn Kirshner, on TikTok, and he said the same thing. It has nothing to do with the case. There's no legal concerns here. Nothing is going to happen from that. Let's say they even take Fani Willis off the case. It doesn't matter because then somebody else in the Attorney General's office will step up and take over and finish the case. This is all about rhetoric, all about the narrative, all about trying to confuse and create chaos and delay. But you can't delay the inevitable. What's going to happen is going to happen. Now, people will say, well, what if they delay it and it goes past the election, whether it be this case or the documents case? So what? So the fuck what? All it will ensure is that Donald Trump will spend the rest of his life in court. Well, what if he gets elected? I've already told you he can't get reelected. There's no way he can get reelected. But even if he did have the possibility of getting reelected, here's the deal. The Washington case with Jack Smith is going to decimate him. The New York lawsuit, where we're going to find out the final decision, is going to decimate him. I mean, people are really worried that he gets nailed by all 91 felonies and everything happens to him. And if one doesn't happen in the time frame they want, oh, it's all over. No, that's not how it works. That's not what it's about. He's going to be done after the first or second conviction. He's done at that point. And by the time they do that, sometime before the election in DC, they will have taken all his money, all his property, all his power away. To be perfectly honest with you, by the time he gets to Florida and by the time he gets to Georgia, he's going to be a shell. There ain't going to be much else to pick off his bones. See what I'm saying? This is the logic of it. Everybody wants to worry about the whole big mess and say, oh, he might slip through. Not slipping through. There's just no way he can do it. Whether you're looking at the odds or looking at the facts, there's just no way he does it. Now, there's another name that's been coming up a lot as of late, Elise Stefanik, a representative from New York. Now, what you have to understand about Elise Stefanik, when she first came into the House of Representatives, she was a moderate. She even helped campaign for Mitt Romney. But she noticed that there might be some hay to gather by going further right and siding with Donald Trump. And that's what she's done. And now a lot of people are thinking she might be the top candidate for being Trump's vice president. But again, who cares? She's never going to get to the nomination, and even if she did, she'll never be vice president. She's going to lose horribly if Donald Trump and she are the candidates. Now, as the press surrounded Stefanik in New Hampshire, who's out there supporting Donald Trump, which further causes people to think that she's going to be the vice presidential candidate, um, a gentleman by the name of Vaughn Hilliard from MSNBC was there. And Hilliard confronted her about Trump's E. Jean Carroll defamation sexual assault case. He said, "How do you grapple with standing by his side while the jury is debating how much to award E. Jean Carroll for being sexually abused by Donald Trump?" Hilliard asked. Of course, she said, "These are witch hunts against President Trump," Stefanik claimed. "The media is so biased. This is just another example of the media being." And then Hilliard shot in and said, "Why not believe E. Jean Carroll? It's not me. It's not the media. It's a jury that found he's sexually abused." And then she went on and said, "Next question, next question." An aide could be heard saying before Stefanik answered. Again and again, the media is out of touch with the American people. Like in 2016, you're going to see the American people speak out loudly and clearly with their vote. Like the American people spoke out in 2017 and 2018 and 2019 and 2020 and 21 and 22, when the Americans spoke out there and Donald Trump lost at every turn. Everybody he endorsed pretty much lost. There was no red wave in 2022. People want to compare 2016 to 2024, and you can't. It's a totally different scenario. This country is a totally different place. We know more about Donald Trump. He's been exposed for the criminal he is. Don't talk about 2016. You might as well be talking about 1916 because there is no comparison. Now, when discussing the confrontation on MSNBC's morning show The Weekend, Hilliard said he felt compelled to ask Stefanik about the Carroll case. He said, "I had to ask Elisa Stefanik, who was there on Donald Trump's behalf, about the trial because the jury is currently debating what to award her for. The judge has already found him liable for sexually abusing her. And she's coming out here on the campaign trail at an important time, 4 days before the New Hampshire primary. And she ultimately told me that she did not believe E. Jean Carroll." Now, this is Trump's second defamation trial with Carroll. He'll probably have a third, and it concerns comments he made about her while he was president in 2019. In the first case last year, a jury found Trump liable for sexually abusing Carroll in the 1990s and then defaming her in 2022. The jury awarded Carroll $5 million in damage. Stefanik is widely considered to be the possible um, vice president at this point. And it's funny, they talked to Nikki Haley too, and they asked her about this E. Jean Carroll thing. And you said, "I don't know much about the case." Of course you don't, you stupid bitch. "But I don't know much about the case, and until he's convicted, I don't have anything to say about it. But if he's convicted, then he needs to pay the price." Well, did Nikki Haley forget that he was found liable for sexual abuse? Or is it that she just doesn't want to talk about it? This is what the media needs to do. They need to go ask the hard questions and refuse to let them off the hook until they answer the question. They don't want to speak out against Donald Trump because they still think they've got something to gain by being next to Donald Trump. Now, I will say this about Nikki Haley yesterday. After Donald Trump did this thing blaming her when he meant Nancy Pelosi, she did bring it up in a speech, and she said, and she started striking out, which we'll probably see more of. She started striking out by saying, if we're going to have somebody who's president, they have to be mentally fit. And when you see something like this, you have to question it. Well, that's close. That's close. You should have been saying this years ago, but you refused to do it because you gained some things from him. He made you the UN ambassador, and you appreciated that, and you thought he could bring you votes. Well, She's now getting to the point where she's going to have to make some choices. And there are going to be hard choices. Donald Trump sees her as a threat now. So everything he says is going to be negative about Nikki Haley. He's going to do all he can to tear her down between now and the primary, just a few days. It'll be interesting to see how Nikki Haley responds to that. Now, of course, we know that there was no government shutdown, as I promised. No way the Republicans are going to allow that to happen. They will take a beating, a bigger beating than they're already going to take, should they let that happen. And in order to keep the government open, then Speaker Mike Johnson had to kind of negotiate and compromise with the Democrats. This makes MAGA very mad. Representative Bob Good warned the House Speaker Mike Johnson about support for his bills in the House on Freedom Caucus Friday. So, what he's basically saying is, you didn't stick with us, so don't expect any support from us when it comes to things you want to do. He said, don't assume you have our votes for the things that don't matter when you don't want them for things that do matter. The Freedom Caucus chair said during an interview with the host Blake Berman on The Hill on News Nation on Friday. Now, what he means by that is when they voted for this continuing resolution, MAGA voted against it, and it would have never passed had the Democrats not had voted for it. And this is what makes them angry. The fact that he counted on Democratic votes to get this thing done. That angers them because, as I've said before, they don't want to make Joe Biden or the Democrats look good. They will burn the fucking house down just to make sure that Joe Biden and the Democrats don't look good. Now, Good's statement comes after the House passed a stopgap funding bill that we know about. Did that on Thursday after Johnson worked out a deal with other legislative leaders to avoid the government shutdown. However, Johnson had to count on Democratic support in the House to pass the legislation, and that pissed off MAGA. Now, Johnson brought the legislation to the floor under suspension of rules, avoiding the requirement to first approve a rule and speeding up the process for the bill's approval. You remember earlier in the week or the week before, they did go through a rules committee and they shut it down ahead of time. They knew that was going to happen again, so they suspended the rules. Now, while conservatives are likely to block the rule, Johnson had to make up for the lower support in his own party now that suspending the rules meant that the legislation needs 2/3 to support to pass and therefore required a bipartisan support. He needed the Democrats. He didn't want the country to shut down, so he needed the Democrats to vote for it. So he had to negotiate with the Democrats, and therein lies the problem with MAGA. MAGA would have been happy to see the government shut down so they could own the libtards and presumably force them into doing something. The problem with that is Joe Biden is a good negotiator. He knows he held all the cards. He would have rode this thing out and let them burn themselves down. Fortunately, Mike Johnson knew he would take the heat personally, and the Republican Party would be destroyed. So he had no choice. He had to negotiate with the Democrats. Now, President Biden signed the bill Friday, meaning the government will stay open through early March. They just push the goalposts back, another continuing resolution. They still have to come up with an ultimate deal in order to keep it open for the remainder of the year. So come early March, we're going to go through this bullshit once again. The House Freedom Caucus already expressed its displeasure with the bill Sunday when the caucus's account called it a surrender to the left on social media. The House GOP is planning to pass a short-term spending bill continuing Pelosi levels with Biden policies to buy time to pass longer-term spending bills at Pelosi levels with Biden policies. This is what surrender looked like, and that's what the caucus posted on Twitter. I know it's X now, but I'm not going to call it that. That's a fucking stupid name. Johnson's predecessor, Kevin McCarthy, was ousted from the position for the very same situation back in October when Representative Matt Gaetz accused McCarthy of siding with the Democrats on the CR to fund the government. So Mike Johnson has done the very thing that Kevin McCarthy did and the very thing that got him kicked out. So will they kick him out in this situation? It's conceivable, but I don't know what they're going to do in place of Mike Johnson. It took them 2 weeks to get him in, and they ended up bringing in a guy that they regretted after they did it. Now, this was written by Representative Andy Biggs, who's also an insurrectionist who may be getting his own indictment. Enough with the continuing resolutions. We've had plenty of time to address funding levels. I will agree with that. Congress keeps punting this while our southern border remains a mess and our national debt continues to surge. We are doing the American people a disservice. Now, Biggs was one of the 8 Republicans, including Gaetz, who voted with Democrats to oust McCarthy for the speakership in October. Now, I want to make a point. It's really interesting about the Republicans. They have 3 main complaints against Joe Biden with this election coming up. First of all, they're very upset about this dirty business, this under the table business between Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. However, after 4 years of investigating it, they have yet to get a shred of evidence. They admit they have no evidence, but they're certain something is there. The second thing they complain about is the economy. Joe Biden's tanking the economy. Well, that's not exactly true either. The stock market is reaching record levels. We've got employment down, gas prices down, inflation down. We've got the GDP up, manufacturing is up, and wages are up. The fact of the matter is the economy is in great shape, and most certainly in better shape than when Donald Trump was in office. So that's not a thing. It'll be interesting to see if they continue talking about this, because it's a little hard to do that when things are running pretty good. Inflation is coming down. That was their big thing. Well, that's coming down now. And Goldman Sachs is predicting that it may go below 2%, which would be lower than when Donald Trump was in office. It's truly amazing that they keep doing this sort of shit. They keep claiming that Donald Trump did a better job, and the fact of the matter is he did not do a better job. Donald Trump was abject failure. He's the only president in the history of the United States to end with fewer jobs than when he started. He actually lost jobs, and we've got presidents that have gained a lot of jobs, but none more than Joe Biden. Joe Biden is responsible for creating more jobs than any president in history. You can say what you want, you can do what you want, but the facts are the facts. You can't argue that fact because the numbers don't lie. They don't fucking lie. So when you decide to go vote in November, you've got 2 choices. You either vote for truth and facts, or you vote for bullshit. And if you're voting for bullshit, you got to vote Republican. And I know nobody here listening to the Rational Boomer podcast is going to do that. All this stuff is coming to a head. All these lies, all this rhetoric that's gone out is starting to fail for them. They just cannot do it. It's not going anywhere. You know, like I'll give you one more example, the border. When all else fails, they will say, well, Joe Biden's leaving the border open. That's not true either. Fact of the matter is, the border issue's been a problem for decades. No president has ever been able to resolve it. It's a tough thing. And it's not because presidents couldn't, it's because of our Congress. Joe Biden has deported more people in his tenure as president than Donald Trump did in his 4 years. So where's that coming from? Secondly, the day after Joe Biden became president, he had a plan to deal with the border. But guess what? The Republicans didn't want anything to do with it. Now, more recently, they're trying to get this budget plan, these spending bills taken care of, and they want something on the border. Joe Biden does want to do something on the border. He's got a plan on the table right now, and it's a bipartisan plan. But guess what? The Republicans don't want any part of it. I'm willing to bet if Joe Biden bent and gave them their draconian plan, they would even turn it down then because they don't want the border to be fixed with Joe Biden in office. They want to use it to complain against him when they get to the election in November. Republicans do not want to fix anything. They don't want to accomplish anything. All they try to do is make sure that Joe Biden can't do anything. And then we know this is true because they did the very same thing to Barack Obama back during his 2 terms. It was obstruction after obstruction after obstruction. And guess what? The Democratic Party doesn't pay for it. The Republican Party doesn't pay for it. You and I pay for it. And I'm getting tired of that shit, aren't you? All right, we're going to wrap things up for the Rational Boomer podcast. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen. I hope you have a great day, and we will talk to you again tomorrow.